You know, Civics 101, the backdrop of all of this is a fundamental philosophical disagreement between the left side of the spectrum and the right side of the spectrum on how far we should go on regulatory frameworks. That's fundamental to our debates in Congress, and that's okay. Our side believes that, well, there's a set of limiting principles that must be applied when you're thinking about regulations. There's certain questions that must be asked about cost versus benefits, side effects you weren't thinking of, and infringement on personal liberty, right? These are questions that must be asked. My problem, and the reason I'm a conservative and not on the left side of the aisle, is because that kind of thinking usually goes like this. If one piece of regulation is good for the environment and doesn't have too much costs on human prosperity, well, then 10 more must be better, maybe 100 more. But of course, that's not true. There is a diminishing return on the benefit of regulations, and I think we're at that point in our history where we're arguing over whether we've reached that peak or not. I think we would argue that we have. And we have some decent evidence for that. It's been said here before. We've watched our emissions decrease more than any other country. We've decreased our methane emissions despite having increased use of natural gas, increased energy demand. We've decreased our air pollutants by 70%. I'm just going off EPA's website here. We've done some amazing things, and so there's a real question as to whether, if we keep going, what is the marginal benefit here? And so that's what we're all getting at. One of the things I noted when you guys do your calculations at EPA, and you do a cost-benefit analysis, but somehow you came up thinking that this is going to have, that these methane regulations are going to have more benefit than costs. So the costs are about $30 billion a year. That's just according to EPA. I bet industry would probably disagree with that. We could debate what the costs are, but there's certainly costs. So what about the benefits? How do you come up with those benefits? I noticed that the social cost of carbon, which is a key ingredient in assessing the benefit of something, because you want to make the externality as costly as possible, right? To make eliminating it as beneficial as possible. So you made your social cost of carbon $190. The Obama administration's social cost of carbon was $42. So how do we explain that discrepancy?
Well, thanks for that question. That's certainly gotten a lot of attention. Just to be clear, these rules were based on the Clean Air Act and its provisions, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, not based on a social cost of carbon calculation.
Sure, but as you go through the rulemaking process, I assume there's a cost benefit, and then you sell it, right? You sell it saying, hey, there's a benefit here, there's this cost. But let's go to the social cost of carbon. How do you come up with that?
After we've applied our legal standards to the record, we come up with a result, and then we look at the benefits using that. Now, what we did as an agency and as part of an administration was we did an exhaustive review of state-of-the-art, peer-reviewed economics and other science to revise the calculation. In 2017, I think the National Academy of Sciences laid out a sort of blueprint for how best to improve the calculation.
Coming up with that calculation of the social cost of carbon, are you including the RCP 8.5 model scenario for climate change?
I'll have to get back to you.
I think you are.
Answer.
I think we know the answer.
Okay.
I don't ask questions I don't already know the answer to. So you are. That entire scenario has been debunked. The UN Intergovernmental Report on Climate Change the panel on climate change does not use that scenario. They say it's wildly unrealistic. For that scenario to be true, globally we'd have to increase our coal consumption by 8 times. That means building another coal plant every single day. We are obviously not on track to do that. There is no other way that you can almost quintuple the Obama administration's social cost of carbon without relying on these wildly unrealistic scenarios.
I'm sorry, I may have misheard. Did you say RCP 8.5?
8.5.
I'd like to check on that and get back to you. If that's okay.
I would love to hear it. I mean, that kind of thing should be very public. We should know what kind of scenarios you're relying on to make your assumptions on very, very important things like the social cost of carbon, which inform very important things like a cost-benefit analysis of a regulation. There's no perfect solutions in policy. There are only trade-offs. And so that cost-benefit analysis is everything. And I yield back.